Hi gang, the Black Templars are possibly the largest Astartes force in the 40k galaxy, their many fleets plying the galaxy, honouring the spirit of their founder Sigismund in continuing the Emperor's Great Crusade across the galaxy. To them this is a holy duty to be prosecuted as they see fit, and woe betide anyone who disagrees. Did I mention we have merch? Stay tuned at the end to find out more. The Black Templars are counted amongst some of the most powerful and dangerous warriors in the galaxy, a massively oversized Astartes chapter who've been a constant presence in the Imperium since its very earliest days, perpetually committed to the longest Imperial crusade ever known, a war waged literally without pause for 10,000 years to prove their unwavering loyalty to the God Emperor of mankind. They're eternal crusaders, relentlessly punishing the Emperor's enemies with fire, bolter and blade. For them, this is a holy mission. Unlike most other Adeptus Astartes chapters, who generally view the Emperor as a supremely powerful mortal, the Black Templars are fierce adherents of the Imperial Creed. They venerate the Master of Mankind as their literal god, and their fanatical faith in that god drives them to wage a never-ending war with only hatred driving them on. To the Black Templars, they're merely keeping alive the spirit of the Emperor's original legions, exemplifying their Primarch's deeply held beliefs and honouring their founder, Sigismund, the first Emperor's champion. And anyone who criticises that is a heretic, standing in the way of the righteous armies of the God Emperor. But none of that is exactly as cut and dry as it seems. 10,000 years is a long time, and like all zealots, the Black Templars have a tendency to misremember any of their history that may not suit their current agenda. The origins of the Black Templars date back to the most turbulent era of Imperial history, the Horus Heresy and its direct aftermath. The chapter traced their lineage to the Imperial Fists, the 7th Legion of the Legiones Astartes. The Primarch of the Imperial Fists was Rogel Dawn, an immensely competent warlord and formidable leader whose martial prowess was matched only by determination and fortitude. During the Great Crusade, the Legion conquered its way across the galaxy, fighting in the armies of the Emperor. The Imperial Fists excelled in strong point assaults, defensive actions, and boarding assaults in the void. Their Primarch hailed from the ice world of Inwit, but the Legion recruited widely from the various planets they brought into compliance, and this resulted in a very diverse chapter culture. Its many subcultures and origins all unified by the martial traditions of the Legion. One of those traditions was the Temple of Oaths. Deep within the 7th Legion's colossal star fortress, the Phalanx, the Temple of Oaths was a shrine to the glory of the Crusade. It was not a temple in the religious sense. The Imperial Fists, their Primarch and their Emperor were all dedicated to the Imperial truth, the casting down of religions in the name of reason. But the Imperial Fists were still crusaders. They believed in the righteousness of their cause and in spreading that belief, and the Temple of Oaths was the symbolic place their warriors came to make or renew their vows to their lord and emperor. The temple was hung with the ragged banners of defeated enemies, every oath made by an Imperial Fist carved into its black stone walls, recorded for all time. The duty of guarding the temple belonged to the Imperial Fist's first company, known as the Templars. Templars were veteran warriors of the Crusade, raised up not only for their martial skill, but their zeal and devotion to the ideals of the Crusade, exemplars of what it meant to be an Imperial Fist. In battle, they were armed with the best war gear in the Legion, artificier armour suits and advanced power blades, and then deployed into the thick of the fighting, or served as a bodyguard to the army's commander. Their leader, rising to this position in the latter days of the Great Crusade, was the first captain of the Legion, Sigismund, the right hand of Rogel Dawn, and widely known as the finest duelist in all the Legiones Astartes. He was a Terran, a stoic, quiet man, the furious rage of a crusader held in check by an iron will, and he was well known across the other legions. He became a constant fixture on the dueling floors of his fellow legions, seeking to perfect his craft. In fact, the Templars practiced practice of shackling their weapons to their wrists was something he adopted when he fought alongside Karl in the dueling circles of the World Eaters. However, the Horus Heresy and the Siege of Terror would shake the foundations of the 7th Legion and of their Templars. Rogaldorn, as the Praetorian of Terror, was the architect of the defence of the Emperor's palace, and the Imperial Fists, along with Sigismund and his Templars, fought on the walls, but the experience of that changed Sigismund forever. Early into the siege, he'd become one of the very few Astartes to convert to the teachings of the Lectitio Divinitatis, the beginnings of the imperial faith, whose adherents saw the emperor as a god, and the first time he revealed this was when he refused Rogaldorn's orders to lead the Imperial Fist's retribution fleet to Istvan V, convinced by his faith that he was better needed on Terra. Rogaldorn was furious and disappointed, seeing this as a betrayal. Not only had Sigismund abandoned the imperial truth, but in doing so, he'd proven that he would place his religion above orders from his Primarch, which was antithetical to the 7th Legion's way of thinking. Over the course of the siege, Sigismund became less and less prominent as a Legion commander, and spent much of the latter part of the conflict leading a loyalist warband outside the walls, hunting traitor forces wherever he could find them, seeking out and slaying the mightiest enemy champions, armed with the Black Sword, an ancient gift given to him by Malcador on behalf of the Emperor himself. Of course, that's not exactly how the Black Templars remember it today. To them, those early Templars were the most pious and faithful of the Legion, and Sigismund's task was a critical one, a holy duty given to him by the Emperor, but also by Dorn himself. Sigismund was a shining exemplar of faith from the very start, and everyone at the time agreed. Anyway, in the aftermath of the heresy, Robute Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, mandated the dissolution of the immense Space Marine legions into smaller independent chapters of about 1,000 Astartes each, enshrined in the Codex Astartes. This was intended to prevent any single commander from wielding the military power necessary to challenge the Imperium again, but Rogaldorn initially resisted it, leading to heated arguments with Guilliman, with both Primarchs accusing the other of disloyalty. Dorn eventually relented, allowing his legion to be subdivided, and one of the first successor chapters born from this process was the Black Templars. But Sigismund, named the Black Templars' first High Marshal, refused to adhere to the precepts of the Codex Astartes himself. He gathered the most zealous brethren of the Imperial Fists, other Space Marines, who had turned to this new religion, and created essentially a new Templar Brethren, the chapter adopting his black and white heraldry. Given this split with the new orthodoxy, Sigismund determined that a major gesture of faith was required to demonstrate this new chapter's loyalty, so upon leaving Terra, he swore a mighty oath that he and his new chapter would never rest in prosecuting their duties against the enemies of the Emperor, and he established the Eternal Crusade. By the 41st millennium, this crusade has continued unbroken for 10,000 standard years, making it the longest Space Marine crusade in Imperial history. Sigismund led the Black Templars for several centuries more, driven by the need to hunt down the traitor legions. After the Wars of the Scouring, part of his duty included maintaining a vigil over the Cadian Gate, anticipating the return of Horus's followers, and in 781 M31, Sigismund was proven correct when Abaddon the Despoiler launched the First Black Crusade. Forcing their way out of the Eye of Terror, Abaddon and his new Black Legion assaulted the Black Templars' flagship, the Eternal Crusader. Sigismund, by this point over 1,000 Terran years old, met Abaddon in single combat, and though Sigismund was eventually slain by the new War Master of Chaos, he did manage to bury his black sword deep in Abaddon's chest, leaving a permanent scar. Since then, the Black Templars have continued in their crusade for the last 10,000 years. During the War of the Beast in M32, the Black Templars under High Marshal Bohemond participated in the Last Wall Protocol and contributed strengths to rebuild the now extinct Imperial Fists chapter. In M34, the chapter ended the Catalexis heresy by executing the psychic terror known as the Cacodominus, the creature's psychic death scream known as the Howling, echoed through the warp, burning out the minds of astropaths and plunging entire subsectors into barbarism, but at least the alien was dead. And during the Wars of Apostasy in M36, known to the chapter as the Terran Crusade, the Black Templars, enraged by the destruction of their chapter keeps by the forces of High Lord Goj Vandire, declared a crusade against Holy Terror itself. High Marshal Siganandus personally led this crusade, fighting alongside the Imperial Fists, Soul Drinkers and Firehawks. After Vandire's death, Siganandus spent years hunting down any who'd broken faith. And they've continued in that vein through to the 41st millennium. Fractured into multiple separate crusades spread across the galaxy, the Black Templars still see themselves as the devoted of Sigismund, one of the few Astartes forces to carry on the spirit of conquest, devoted to the glory of the God Emperor and the purging of his foes. As a culture, the Black Templars are defined by their uncompromising methods and their extreme devotional zeal. The core belief of the Black Templars is the divinity of the Emperor of mankind and their own appointed role as his crusaders and champions. This fierce adherence to the Imperial Creed is instilled in the neophytes and initiates of the chapter through continuous reinforcement of their battle honours, holy penance and prayer, self-flagellation and the swearing of vows and oaths, and through relentless psycho-conditioning. They strive to forgo all but the bare necessities, purifying themselves to emulate Sigismund's example as they remember it. Their ceremonial dedications and martial drills one and the same. They see that 10,000-year crusade as a monumental act of atonement and loyalty, a way of honouring and renewing the oaths sworn by Sigismund. They're utterly ruthless towards anything perceived as a threat to the Emperor and his domains, and consider it part of their duty to avenge every wrong committed against the Imperium. In fact, their doctrines teach that the only response to such blasphemy is pure hatred, a bone-deep disgust for anything that doesn't conform to what they see as the Emperor's divine perfect rule. And the chaplains of the chapter nurture and encourage this, trusting to their rage to keep their battle brothers pure when faced with the horrors of the galaxy. Before battle, it's common for brothers of the chapter to stoke this hatred, swearing terrible oaths and vows: suffer not the unclean to live, abhor the witch, uphold the honour of the Emperor, some of which have been handed down from the very earliest days of the chapter, these ancient oaths helping to steel their souls against the horrific threats they face. As a chapter, they reserve a specific and intense hatred for the mutant, the heretic, and the witch, seeing all of these as conduits for chaos and damnation. The very presence of a psyker on the battlefield can drive them into a zealous fury, and in a significant divergence from the Codex Astartes, the Black Templars refuse to field any librarians. Their extreme revulsion towards individuals tainted by the warp prevents them from recruiting any man bearing the mutation that allows psychic abilities. However, the Black Templars do tolerate and even honour occasionally some certain Imperial psychers. They view astropaths with a level reverence, seeing them as holy disciples since they commune directly with the God Emperor. Similarly, navigators are endured because their psychic blessing allows them to see the divine light of the Astronomicon, guiding the Crusades to deliver retribution. The teachings of the chapter constantly extol this way of life as one of pious knightly honour, the Black Templars being the epitome of Crusader faith and zeal, just like the Templars of the Old Legion. Their long histories are kept aboard their flagship, the Eternal Crusader, in the Hall of Records, referred to internally as the Scriptorium of Truths, where scribes meticulously record the chapter's actions. This archive is, of course, carefully curated by puritanical chaplains who actively burn or suppress any record that might contradict the chapter's existing dogma, since obviously anything that suggests the Black Templars to have ever erred in the service of the Emperor surely must be the foulest blasphemy. And because of all these beliefs, the Black Templars can sometimes prove quite dangerous allies. While their faith is a source of incredible resolve, allowing them to win against impossible odds, their zeal often leads to very extreme actions. Their violent totality often shakes other Imperial forces that fight alongside them, whose suggestions are often dismissed, since nobody could be as righteous or faithful as the Black Templars. They see negotiation as a weakness and are willing to completely ruin conquered worlds or destroy cities to facilitate a battle. They have little to no regard for civilian casualties, since it should be the glory of any person to die in the service of the Emperor, and they've been known to mercilessly wipe out entire planetary populations that they deem to have been infected by heresy or mutation without offering surrender or mercy. Their dogmatism means they're extremely insular and will turn that wrath against imperial allies they deem unworthy or compromised, or simply dishonourable by their own standards. Many planetary governors have regretted petitioning a Black Templars crusade for aid, the Marines turning on them once the greater enemy's defeated. The Black Templars in the 41st millennium remain a fleet-based chapter, one with their own structures of organisation that bear very little similarity to the Codex Astartes, except in terms of simple things like squad sizes and unit markings. Their symbol is the Crusader Cross, a device that's historically associated with the old Imperial Fists of Legion veterans. Individual initiates personalise their armour with devotional imagery, litanies and Crusader seals. That armour is the colour of Sigismund's personal heraldry, painted black with white detailing. And the usual squad speciality symbols are often absent in the chapter. Instead, their tactical role, battle line, fire support, etc., is indicated by the colour of the pauldron trim. As befits that knightly image, robes and surplices are common, and the warriors of the chapter still observe Sigismund's tradition of chaining their weapons to their armour so they can never be disarmed in the heat of battle. The Black Templars do not often or really ever operate in chapter strength. Instead, the chapter's broken down into a number of separate crusades. These are autonomous armies tasked with a specific objective or campaign, some very lengthy and lasting for decades, and they continue campaigning until that mission's complete. The number of active crusades fluctuates based on the needs of the Imperium and the chapter, but usually there are no less than 3 at any one time, and historical records show periods when up to 14 crusades were active across just the segmentum solar. The size of a crusade is highly variable, ranging from small forces of a few squads, maybe 50 Space Marines, up to 100 warriors, up to formations equivalent to several Codex companies, sometimes numbering hundreds and hundreds of battle brothers. Because of this, it's likely that the chapter vastly exceeds the 1,000 Astartes limit defined in the Codex, something the Black Templars simply don't care about. Their full strength might even reach 5,000 or 6,000 Space Marines, though their true numbers remain a mystery even to them. This is partly because each crusade is completely autonomous, their fleet consisting of its own battle barges, strike cruisers, training vessels and forge ships, and each looking to their own recruitment and training. Each crusade is commanded by a marshal, a rank roughly equivalent to a captain in other chapters. Crusades are often named for that marshal in charge, and they apply his crusade seal to their warriors' armour and war engines. And the larger crusades may subdivide their forces into separate fighting companies, each led by the marshal's castellans, a position roughly equivalent to a lieutenant in other chapters. Above these stands the High Marshal, the de facto chapter master and inheritor of Sigismund's ancient duties, elected by a council of marshals and nominally in charge of the whole chapter. The High Marshal's crusade is based aboard the chapter's flagship and Sigismund's old command, the Eternal Crusader. As a fleet-based force, the Eternal Crusader has become the spiritual centre of the chapter. Its massive expanse is filled with chapels and reliquaries containing vast hoards of sacred artifacts from the ages. These relics, maintained by chapter serfs, range from banners carried during the Great Crusade to fragments of Rogaldorn's original sword. The High Marshal oversees the overall progress and deployment of all the active crusades and holds incredible power, decreeing where his forces will fight without necessary recourse to the High Lords of Terror or any other imperial institution. If a crusade is ever deemed complete, its forces might be reassigned piecemeal to bolster other crusades, or they might be assimilated back into the High Marshal's household until a new crusade is mustered. However, since the crusades themselves are so insular, it's common for initiates or even marshals to never have met the High Marshal before they inevitably die in battle. The current High Marshal is Helbrecht, considered a living personification of his chapter, as brutal and callous as he is tactically gifted. His advance through the chapter's ranks was incredibly swift, first coming to wider attention in the Sword Brethren of the Vinculus Crusade, and then ascending to Marshal of that crusade when his mentor died, demonstrating a shrewd strategic mind. He's still regarded as one of the finest Void commanders within the Adeptus Astartes. As Marshal, he suffered a significant defeat and lost his hand battling the Necron overlord Imhotep the Stormlord in 930 M41, but following a 5-year crusade of penitence and a pilgrimage back to the Phalanx, Helbrecht returned with his faith rekindled and exacted revenge, destroying Imhotep's tomb ship in 985 M41. When the sitting High Marshal, Cordal, was slain, Helbrecht was unanimously elected as his successor and has since launched the Ghoul Stars Crusade and diverted the Damaris and Tiberior Crusades, joining his own forces to relieve the besieged world of Armageddon during its Third War in 998 M41. Aside from the household of the High Marshal, the chapter's specialist detachments also maintain a small level of centralised control. Chaplains are essential to the Black Templars, responsible for indoctrinating the absolute faith and bone-deep hatred required of the initiates, and overseeing the spiritual and physical training of neophytes. Chaplains are typically organised at the chapter level, but then deployed out to individual crusades, where they maintain the crusade's reclusiam, the shrine and spiritual centre of that crusade, and oversee its warriors' vows before battle. Tech Marines and apothecaries are also deployed centrally, assigned to crusades as they're needed, but other than those specialists, each crusade looks to its own numbers. Recruitment is handled through a system of chapter keeps. While, as a crusading chapter, they reject a permanent homeworld, the Black Templars establish keeps on every world they conquer or reclaim. These keeps are smaller than conventional fortress monasteries, but are formidable bastions, capable of accommodating 200 to 300 space marines, though very few are actually garrisoned in that way. The keeps act as staging posts for future crusades, maintain a vigil over various regions, and also serve as crucial recruitment centres. Because they're often built on recently ravaged worlds, the keeps often recruit from populations that exhibit a fierce martial culture, usually one recently tempered by war. Aspirants who declare their intent to join the Black Templars must endure a dangerous journey to reach the chapter keep, where they're rigorously tested for faith, purity, and martial ability. Once they're approved, aspirants are then implanted with the gene seed organs required, and their training continues until their assignment to a passing crusade fleet. Unlike Codex chapters, the Black Templars do not maintain a dedicated scout company as a training battalion. Training is instead conducted on crusade. A neophyte who survives the trials of entry to a given crusade is assigned to the tutelage of a single, fully initiated battle brother known as an initiate. This relationship is an apprenticeship. The neophyte acts as a squire, serving his mentor and pledging obedience, and in return, the initiate swears an oath to train the neophyte in warfare and in the Black Templars' methods of worship. The initiate takes his neophyte into combat, instructing him by bloody example, and the bond there is usually very deep. Should the neophyte fall, the initiate swears a death oath to avenge him. The initiate battle brother alone can determine when his apprentice has proven his courage and skill sufficiently, allowing the neophyte to be elevated to full battle brother. This master to apprentice system ensures the preservation of the chapter's traditions, wisdom, and experience through the ages. The majority of Black Templars are initiates, skilled with bolter and blade and fighting on the front lines of the crusade. The greatest warriors amongst them might be raised further to members of the Marshal's household. These are sword brethren, handpicked by the Marshal of the crusade and accorded the same honours and respect as chapter veterans, their status marked by red trim on their black pauldrons. As sword brethren, they're no longer required to mentor neophytes, and they receive specialised training, particularly in the use of tactical dreadnought armour, Terminator armour. Each crusade also maintains another honoured position, that of the Emperor's Champion, believed to be a manifestation of the Emperor's will and a representation of the ideals of Sigismund himself. This unique role is filled on an ad hoc basis. On the eve of battle, a Black Templar, usually an initiate, might receive a divine vision of their future deeds. They present themselves to the chaplains, who anoint them and ritually clothe them in holy artefacts. They wear the armour of faith, a form of artificier armour inscribed with sacred wards, and carry the Black Sword, a massive mastercrafted power sword similar to Sigismund's original blade. The actual equipment each champion gets might vary here, but each crusade, however small, holds something aside to fulfill this role. As the champion prays through the night, the Battle Brothers' personality is often subsumed by the persona of the Emperor's champion, who's believed to be a direct manifestation of the God Emperor's intent, his duty to seek out and slay the enemy's most powerful champions in the thick of combat. The rest of the Black Templars will of course go to any lengths to recover those artifacts once the Emperor's champion inevitably falls in battle. The combat doctrine of the Templars is direct, aggressive, and favours close quarters engagement. The Black Templars prioritise swift and devastating shock assaults, plunging into the enemy lines as quickly as possible. They operate with a merciless, focused aggression, always pressing the attack and unwilling to wait in defence, embracing confrontation and seeking to end the battle immediately at the edge of the blade so that they can keep moving onwards. That doctrine necessitates mobility and speed. Drop pod assaults are extremely common, as is deployment from an armoured spearhead of heavily armed vehicle. The Black Templars were actually the first chapter to discover the STC database for the Land Raider Crusader during the Geralas Crusade in M39, a variant specifically armed and built to serve as a line breaker, replacing its las cannons with hurricane bolters and increasing its transport capacity. Given their overwhelming preference for fighting face-to-face, many Black Templars choose to carry weapons better suited to close combat, such as chainswords and power fists, even issuing the standard Holy Bolter for a melee weapon when possible. As a direct result of that preference, specialised fire support units like Devastator squads and heavy ranged weaponry in general are notably rare within the chapter's forces. Instead, the majority of the fighting companies take to the field of battle as Crusader squads of Templars initiates who fight alongside their attendant neophytes. The squads are tactically flexible, not through any particular design, but rather because of the varying preferences of the initiates themselves, who could be armed with conventional bolters or close combat weapons. Their novitiates, who haven't yet earned the right to wear full power armour, go into battle clad in the lighter carapace used by scouts in other chapters. A full listing of the campaigns of the Black Templars would be almost impossible to list. It's possible not even the Templars themselves have a totally accurate record anymore, especially given how much of their own history they burn. But the 41st millennium and the rise of the era Indomitus has kept them busier than ever. One of their most famous recent conflicts was the Third War for Armageddon, where the Black Templars, alongside the Space Wolves, fought the forces of the Orc warlord Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka. During the war, High Marshal Helbrecht assumed command of the Void Battle, while small detachments of Templars operated in the hives on the surface. Notably, the detachment commanded by the newly invested Reclusiarch Grimaldus was instrumental in saving Hell's Reach Hive. And as the war died down, the Black Templars' fleet insisted on continuing to pursue Ghazghkull away from the system. A few years later, when the Great Rift opened, the Templars found themselves scattered. Several crusades vanished entirely, and those remaining intensified their purge against mutation and heresy, coming to the aid of many imperial worlds, often prioritizing shrine worlds or other sites of holy significance. During this chaotic time, the newly returned Primarch Robute Guilliman's Torchbearer fleets delivered Primaris Space Marines to the Black Templars in person. The Templars had always remembered the Lord of the Ultramarines as Guilliman the Divisive, as they saw his commandments to split the legions as despotic, only tempered by the input of the most loyal Primarch, Rogel Dawn. Fearing the fanatical chapter would therefore reject the newcomers, Guilliman met Helbrecht aboard the Eternal Crusader. Helbrecht, though impatient to continue hunting Thraka, accepted Guilliman as a son of the God Emperor and did eventually see the value of the Primaris Marines, incorporating them into his crusade, though some crusades were considerably less agreeable and had to be convinced a few times before they would accept the new Primaris Marines. As that interaction shows, the Black Templars are one of the most zealous but militarily divergent chapters of the Adeptus Astartes, and can be something of a dangerous loose cannon within the Imperium. Ultimately, their culture derives from the crusader tendencies of the old Imperial Fist Legion, with their fiery zeal and stubborn refusal to yield, but cut adrift from the more practical, sensible elements of that legion that kept that zeal in check. And in isolation, it's become more and more extreme over the years. Their zeal and self-righteousness makes them terrifyingly effective, but this fanatical devotion also creates critical weaknesses and internal contradictions that highlight the hypocrisy of the Imperium itself. While they worship the Emperor as a god, a concept generally abhorrent bored by other Astartes chapters for thousands of years, they simultaneously cling to the belief that they alone carry on the secular Great Crusade. Their unwavering adherence to that faith, while protecting them from corruption, denies them the valuable strategic assets of a librarius and causes friction with other imperial organizations like the Inquisition or the Astra Militarum. Furthermore, their zealous requirement to crush all enemies, accepting no surrender and often leaving little behind, means that the planets they liberate are often left shattered, wars often being won, but in a needlessly destructive manner, before the Crusade moves swiftly on, concerned only with the next target rather than rebuilding the worlds they've left ruined. And that contradiction is very much their role within the history of 40k too. The Black Templars were introduced as a colour scheme, basically, in the 90s, in the middle of 2nd edition, but with no background. It was only with the release of 3rd edition 40k that they moved into the spotlight. 3rd edition is often credited with a turn towards a more grim-dark 40k. In many people's minds, 3rd edition is synonymous with the jettisoning of some of the sillier 80s and 90s lore and its replacement with a darker, edgier, more serious feel. And it's certainly true that 3rd edition ramped up the medievalism in the setting. This had been present before, of course, but the 3rd edition art was sketchier and grittier, with John Blanche's work right at the front compared to some of the cartoonier feel of 2nd edition. The poster chapters of 2nd edition had been the bright, shiny Blood Angels or Roman-themed Ultramarines, but for 3rd edition it was the grimy, brutal, horrible Black Templars, and the year after 3rd edition was released came Codex Armageddon, which introduced a lot of their lore and introduced their first ever army list. But this darkening of the lore is, to be honest, a bit of an exaggeration. Not that much changed, and 3rd edition was still silly as all hell, and the Black Templars' absolute ridiculousness as a chapter was part of the joke. They pulled Space Marines back for a while, from being something shiny and heroic to being something really, really horrible, something that the Imperium needs, but you probably really don't want to ever meet. The Black Templars are the Imperium in a microcosm, inarguably effective, but also ridiculously self-defeating, dogmatic to the point of complete absurdity. In keeping with 40k's particular brand of satire, they're a real-world concept, cool crusader knights, but held up for the ridiculous self-serving lie that idea mostly was, even in real-world history. Thanks for watching. And if you'd like to hear more about the various chapters of the 41st millennium, there's probably another video popping up to the right. And if you'd like to support the channel, we've got all the usual ways: like and subscribe, join the Patreon or the membership scheme for early access videos, or buy one of our stupid t-shirts. Links for all that are in the thing below. See ya.